and see if they can make them agree.
Mark Roberts.
Well, isn't it, the interesting thing is if they all agreed, I think the critics of the New Testament would say, aha, collusion. In fact, there was an effort in the second century among Christians to try and get them to sort of be one coherent account. Interestingly enough, the early church rejected that in favor of what one would say it was before more independent witnesses, although a couple of the Gospels are probably relying on each other. Folk who have worked this through, and I would be one of them, have found ways to see, yes, there are differences in the telling of the story, but to suggest that there's somehow wild contradictions makes me again wonder if you and I are living in parallel universes.
Well, I mean, you force me to press you. I mean, do you think that at the time of the crucifixion, the graves in the Greater Jerusalem area opened and many of the dead came out and walked the streets? That's one account.
Yes.
It's not sustained, but you do think that happened. It's
in Matthew's Gospel.
Yes.
As a believer, I think it happens. If I put on my historian hat, I say this is one gospel, one witness to this. This makes it, again, now speaking as a historian, historically unlikely. As a believer, I believe it. What I'm talking about...
It's absolutely flabbergasting, because among other things, that surely degrades the idea of resurrection by making it commonplace.
It degrades the idea of resurrection by making...
If it can happen, if just the graves can open and anyone can get up and walk around, what's so special about the proposed resurrection of the Nazarene?
Well, it's even worse than that, because Christian theology holds that every person will be resurrected, so we've thoroughly degraded it.
Well, while you are making things up, why not throw that in?
Can I ask, was the account in Matthew contradicted by the other Gospels?
There's no contradiction. All I'm saying is when there's one testimony to something that otherwise we would consider to be unlikely, if you simply look at that from a historical point of view, you'd say that that's unlikely. Now, I happen to believe that it happened, but I believe that it happened because as I have studied the Gospel of Matthew, I find Matthew to be a reliable historical witness to what happened in that time. So on that ground, I'd argue for it.
No one, whether Tacitus nor Josephus or any other chronicler of the period, seems to think there was an earthquake.
We'll be right back, and we're going to talk Bart Ehrman with Christopher Hitchens, author of God is Not Great, Mark Roberts, Can We Trust the Gospels? Both books are linked at hughhewitt.com. I'll be right back on the Great God Debate on the Hugh Hewitt Show. 55 minutes after the hour as we draw to conclusion hour number one of the 3-hour Great God Debate between Christopher Hitchens, author of God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, Dr. Mark Roberts, author most recently of Can We Trust the Gospels. I turn to Bart Ehrman. He figures prominently in Christopher Hitchens' book. He figures prominently in Mark Roberts' book. Christopher Hitchens, what do you find so appealing about Bart Ehrman?
Well, I find it's what Bertrand Russell used to call the argument of evidence against interest, or as my friend, you probably know him, John O'Sullivan, says if the Pope says he believes in God, he's only doing his job. If he says he doesn't believe in God, he may be onto something. Barton Ehrman did the best a man could do to keep up his belief, and he appears to have been, I hope I, again, don't trespass into my partner's field of expertise, but to be quite a renowned scholar of the Gospels in several languages in the believing Christian community. I'm right, am I not, in saying this?
Mark Roberts.
He is a well-regarded scholar.
And he came to the conclusion that it was mythical.
When he was a young man.
Stories, including some of the ones that I used to most enjoy contemplating when I was being taught the Bible at school, are inserted even later than one had, so to say, feared.
Mark Roberts.
I think you're talking there about the story of the woman caught in adultery in John 8. Yes, he points out that particular story is not found in the earliest of the copies, the manuscripts of the Gospel of John that we have. The thing is that has been well known for centuries to any and every scholar and most Christians, because if you open up your Bible, you'll find out that in most copies of the Bible, that story is in brackets anyway. That's old news. I don't know why in particular that's relevant.
Oh, it isn't particularly relevant. It's just it was the one that struck me because it used to be one of my favorite stories, that's all. The totality of Dr. Ehrman's work, the book is called Misquoting Jesus.
Yes.
Your estimate of misquoting Jesus.
I can't wait to read your reply to it, because I've tried and failed.
Well,
find someone who will take the book on from a Christian point of view. So perhaps I've now found one.
Oh, you have.
Well, you may not be persuaded, but in fact, the second chapter of my book looks at the textual and manuscript background for the Gospels. And in that, I try to lay out much of what Ehrman does. And by the way, I need to say, much of his scholarship is quite fine, though he has been a person who has been opposing Christianity for 30 years. So I don't know that he's necessarily objective but in all things, nor am I. But he is a fine scholar. But
excuse me?
Huh?
He's been an opponent of Christianity for 30 years?
Yes. He lost his. He admits to losing his faith in graduate school. He's an atheist. And he has been arguing as an atheist now for over 30 years and writing books opposing Orthodox Christian faith.
My understanding was very different from that. I'm going to have to check.
No, it's quite true. There's a place in which he himself talks about losing his faith and yet still celebrating Christmas rather sadly.
I will be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. We'll take a short break for the news and the traffic and then the great God